Cheating wife's brutal affair. My revenge demolished her life. Reddit confession. Okay, Reddit. I'm using a throwaway for obvious reasons. I'm utterly broken, beyond anything I thought possible, and I just need to get this out. Maybe someone out there has been through something similar, or hell, maybe just reading this will make someone feel less alone. My name's Mark, and I thought I had it all. 10 years married to Chloe, my high school sweetheart, or so I believed. We built a life, a beautiful home, 2 great careers, talks of kids in the next year or 2. The whole 9 yards, picture perfect from the outside. But the cracks started showing, subtly at first, like hairline fractures you barely notice until they spiderweb into something destructive. It began a few months ago. Chloe, always so vibrant and present, started becoming distant. Physically there, but mentally a million miles away. Her phone became an extension of her hand, practically surgically attached. She'd take it to the bathroom. Even when we were just watching TV, she'd have it face down and snatch it up if I so much as glanced her way. Standard stuff. I told myself, people get busy. Work. Friends. Nothing to worry about. Then came the late nights. Girls' night out, networking event, extra hours at the office. At first, I was supportive. Go for it, babe, you deserve a break. But these breaks started stretching into 1 a.m., 2 a.m., sometimes even later. She'd come home, always looking a little too put together for someone who'd just worked late, or a little too disheveled for a casual get-together. And the excuses? They got flimsier, more vague. A growing pit formed in my stomach, a cold, hard knot that no amount of rationalizing could loosen. My gut was screaming, but my heart, stubbornly, refused to listen. This was Chloe. My Chloe. She wouldn't, right? God, I was so stupid. The breaking point came like a bolt from the blue, but in hindsight, it had been building for weeks, months even. One Tuesday evening, Chloe was supposedly at a yoga retreat with her friend Sarah. I was home alone, trying to distract myself with some mindless TV, but my mind kept drifting to her. I missed her, I told myself. That's why I was feeling antsy. I decided to do some laundry, her laundry mostly, since mine was already done. Reaching into the pocket of her favorite jeans, the ones she always claimed were too tight now, but still wore, I felt something crinkly. A receipt. My heart immediately started pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled it out. It was from a fancy, expensive restaurant downtown, one we talked about going to for our anniversary, but never did because she said it was too pricey and overrated. The date on the receipt was from last Saturday night, the same night she'd told me she was staying late at the office for a huge project. And the total, good God, it was astronomical. 2 entrees, multiple rounds of drinks, and a ridiculously priced bottle of wine. Definitely not a yoga retreat dinner, and certainly not a late night at the office meal. A cold dread spread through me, numbing my fingers as I unfolded the crumpled paper further. At the bottom, handwritten, was a short, flirty note. Had a great night, baby. Can't wait for round 2. XOXO, J. My vision blurred for a second. J, not Mark. Not her husband. Not me. The world spun. All the little things, the late nights, the phone, the distance, the flippant excuses, they coalesced into one undeniable, sickening truth. She wasn't just working late. She wasn't just having girls' nights. She was with someone else. My Chloe. My wife. I felt like I'd been sucker punched directly in the soul. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. The next few hours were a blur of shock and denial, followed by a tidal wave of gut-wrenching pain. I paced the house, the receipt clutched in my trembling hand. The letters J and XOXO burned into my brain like a brand. I tried calling her, rationalizing that maybe there was an innocent explanation, a wild misunderstanding. But my calls went straight to voicemail. Again and again. Each unanswered ring amplified the growing chasm of fear and anger inside me. By the time she finally waltzed through the door on Wednesday morning, bright and chirpy, humming some pop song, I was a coiled spring. Her yoga retreat had apparently ended early. She looked refreshed, almost glowing, which only twisted the knife deeper. Hey babe, miss me? She said, dropping her overnight bag by the door and heading for the kitchen like nothing was amiss. I just stood there, speechless for a moment, the weight of the betrayal crushing me. Then, something snapped. Where were you really last night, Chloe? My voice was rough, barely recognizable. She stopped, her back to me, and chuckled. What are you talking about, Mark? I told you, Sarah's yoga retreat. We had an amazing time. You should try it sometime. It's so relaxing. Don't you dare lie to me. I cut her off, my voice rising. I strode into the kitchen, the crumpled receipt now held out like an accusation. Does this look like a yoga retreat receipt to you, Chloe? From Jay? With XOXO? I watched her face drain of all color, her jaw slackening. The carefully constructed facade crumbled instantly. Her eyes darted from the receipt to my face, filled with a mixture of shock and dawning panic. It was a look I'd never seen on her before, one of pure, unadulterated guilt. The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. The silence stretched, thick with her guilt and my raging fury. She stood there, frozen, the color slowly returning to her face, replaced by a defensive flush. Mark, what is this? Where did you get that? Her voice was barely a whisper at first, then gained a slight edge of indignation, as if I was the one in the wrong for finding it. Don't even try it, Chloe, I snarled, my voice shaking with a tremor of pure rage. You really think I'm that stupid? Yoga retreat? Staying late at the office? While you're out having 5-star dinners with some Jay and getting XOXO notes. Who is he, Chloe? Who is he? She finally found her voice, a sudden burst of tears, but they felt fake, rehearsed. Oh my God, Mark, it's not what you think. It's just a friend, a client. He was just trying to impress me for a business deal. The note, that's just a joke. You know how some people are, overly friendly. She was babbling, her hands wringing, her eyes darting around the room, avoiding mine. He's just an acquaintance, I swear. Nothing happened. It was a business dinner, strictly professional. He must have written that, jokingly. The lies piled up, each one more ridiculous than the last. A joke? A 5-course meal, and a bottle of wine with a joke note? What kind of business deal ends with "can't wait for round 2, baby"? I was practically yelling now, my throat raw. Did you forget you're married? Or did that just slip your mind while you were out networking? Her attempts at justification quickly dissolved into anger. You went through my pockets? How dare you? You don't trust me. After everything we have. The audacity, the sheer nerve, to turn it back on me, to make me the villain for discovering her betrayal, sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. My hands clenched into fists, shaking uncontrollably. This wasn't the woman I married. This was a stranger, a liar, a betrayer. My heart shattered into a million irreparable pieces right there on our kitchen floor. The confrontation escalated quickly, dissolving into a whirlwind of accusations, denials, and raw, unfiltered pain. Chloe, seeing her lies were failing, switched tactics. The fake tears dried up, replaced by a cold, venomous anger. You know what, Mark? Maybe I did deserve a nice dinner. Maybe I deserve to feel appreciated for once. You're always so busy with your job, your hobbies. What about me? The sheer gall of her blaming me for her infidelity hit me like a physical blow. Appreciated. Is that what you call it, Chloe? Fucking someone else and then blaming me for it? I couldn't believe the words coming out of her mouth or mine. We were in uncharted territory, a dark, toxic space I never imagined we'd inhabit. She started screaming then, a high-pitched, almost hysterical shriek. It wasn't like that. Nothing happened. You're overreacting. You always overreact. But her eyes, though blazing with fury, also held a flicker of something else, fear. The fear of being caught, of her perfect life unraveling. I was shaking from head to toe, my entire body buzzing with a mixture of adrenaline and profound grief. My chest felt like it was being squeezed in a vice. The love I had for her, the decade of shared memories, the dreams we'd built, it all felt like a grotesque mockery now. Every "I love you," every tender moment, every plan for the future was tainted a lie. She was not just cheating, she was rewriting our entire history, turning it into a cruel joke. The pain was so immense, so all-consuming, that it almost felt physical. It wasn't just anger, it was a deep, existential sorrow. The person I had committed my life to, the one I trusted implicitly, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. My world, once a stable, comforting place, had just crumbled into dust around me. I felt hollowed out, an empty shell of the man I was just hours before. The silence after her screams died down was even worse than the shouting, filled with the echo of shattered trust. I knew then, with a sickening certainty that something fundamental in our relationship was broken beyond repair. After that explosive argument, Chloe stormed out, slamming the door so hard the house practically vibrated. She didn't come back that night, or the next. I spent those days in a daze, barely eating, barely sleeping. The house felt like a tomb, every corner haunted by memories that were now poisoned. My mind replayed every interaction, every suspicious glance, every flimsy excuse, fitting them into the horrifying new narrative. The image of her with Jay, laughing, touching, kissing, seared itself into my brain. The emotional toll was immense. I swung wildly between volcanic rage and a crushing, incapacitating sadness. One moment, I was picturing myself confronting this Jay, wanting to unleash all my pain and anger. The next, I was curled up on the couch, staring blankly at the wall, tears silently streaming down my face, utterly numb. I felt like a ghost in my own life. The betrayal wasn't just about sex. It was about the desecration of everything we had built. It was a complete disrespect for our vows, our shared future, and my very existence. I started reaching out, hesitantly, to a couple of trusted friends, just to vent, to feel less alone. Their shock and sympathy were a small comfort, but nothing could truly alleviate the profound emptiness inside me. I felt like my identity as a husband, a partner, had been stripped away. Who was I, if not Chloe's husband? It was a terrifying realization, a complete loss of self. I questioned everything: my judgment, my intuition, my worth. Was I not enough? Was I blind? The acceptance, when it finally started to trickle in, wasn't a moment of peace, but a weary resignation. This wasn't a nightmare I could wake up from. This was my reality. My wife had cheated, lied, and tried to blame me for it. There was no going back to us. That version of us was dead. And with that understanding, a cold, hard resolve began to form in the pit of my stomach. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about reclaiming my dignity. Hey, if you're finding this story resonating with you, or you just want to support the channel, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me out. Chloe eventually returned, not with an apology, but with a calculated calm that chilled me to the bone. She walked in like she'd just been on vacation, dropped her bag, and looked at me, her eyes devoid of any real remorse. All right, Mark. I've had some time to think. This isn't just my fault. We both contributed to the breakdown of this marriage. The audacity. It was breathtaking. I just stared at her, my face probably a mask of disbelief. Contributed? I finally managed, my voice a dangerous whisper. You mean I contributed to you screwing someone else behind my back? That's what you're saying? She sighed dramatically. Look, I'm not saying what I did was right, but you were never around. Always working, always with your friends. I felt neglected, Mark. And someone else paid attention to me. The victim narrative, plain as day. She was twisting it, molding it, trying to paint me as the villain and herself as the poor, lonely wife driven to another man's arms. But something had shifted in me during her absence. The raw, incapacitating grief had hardened into something cold and resolute. The Mark who would have begged, pleaded, or even tried to understand her reasons was gone. In his place was a man who felt a deep, abiding anger, yes, but also a fierce desire for justice. I wasn't going to let her rewrite history or diminish the enormity of her betrayal. Get out, I said, my voice low and steady. She blinked, taken aback. What? I said, get out, Chloe. Get out of my house. Our marriage is over. She started to protest, to argue, to threaten, but I just pointed to the door. Now, or I call the police. You can come back with a lawyer to discuss assets, but you are not staying here. The look on her face, a mixture of shock and dawning realization that her manipulation wouldn't work this time, was almost satisfying. Almost. Because even through the anger, the pain still throbbed, a dull, constant ache. This was the first step, but the path ahead was still shrouded in darkness. She left that day, but not without a theatrical scene, accusing me of being heartless and ruining her life. I just stood there, watching her go, the anger still a raging inferno, but now accompanied by a stark, chilling clarity. My decision was made, divorce. There was no going back, no working on this. The trust was obliterated, the respect annihilated. But it wasn't just about ending the marriage anymore. The depth of her betrayal, the way she'd lied and then tried to blame me, had ignited a darker impulse. I wanted more than just separation. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the pain she'd inflicted. I spent the next few weeks meticulously gathering evidence. I had the receipt, of course, but I also started checking her old laptop, a relic she rarely used but had never bothered to wipe. To my horror, I found incriminating texts, emails, and even photos, explicit ones, confirming the affair wasn't a one-off business dinner. It had been going on for months, with this Jay, who turned out to be her new manager. He was married too, with kids. The hypocrisy and callousness of it all made my stomach churn. I consulted a lawyer, outlining everything. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly grim. "Mark," she said, "this is textbook egregious marital misconduct. We can ensure you get a favorable outcome in the divorce settlement. She won't be able to claim a thing." But financial victory wasn't enough for me. It felt too clean, too simple for the magnitude of the wound she'd carved into my soul. I wanted the truth to be known. I wanted consequences that went beyond a legal document. A cold, calculated plan began to form in my mind, a way to expose her, not just to the courts, but to her perfect little world she worked so hard to maintain. It was a dangerous path, I knew, one that could backfire. But the image of her smirking face, blaming me for her infidelity, fueled a burning need for something more brutal, more personal. The acceptance I'd found earlier wasn't peace. It was the calm before a storm, and I was ready to unleash it. My plan was simple, brutal, and aimed directly at her carefully constructed image. Chloe was obsessed with appearances, her career, and her social standing. Her new manager, Jay, was also a significant player in their company. I knew that exposing their affair would not only humiliate her, but could also have serious repercussions for both their careers. The first step was an anonymous email to the HR department of her company, detailing the affair, mentioning the restaurant receipt, which I conveniently scanned, and hinting at the explicit evidence I possessed. I didn't attach the photos yet. I wanted them to sweat, to fear what was coming. The email also mentioned Jay's married status, ensuring maximum impact. Then, I turned my attention to her social circle. Chloe was big on social media, constantly posting about her perfect life with me. She had a tight-knit group of friends, many of whom were mutual acquaintances, and some were even friends with Jay's wife. I created a fake social media profile, carefully curating it to look like a sympathetic, concerned friend. My target was Jay's wife. I found her on Facebook, and using my fake profile, sent her a polite, seemingly worried message. "I feel terrible doing this, but I've recently come across some disturbing information involving your husband and Chloe, my last name. I believe you deserve to know the truth." I attached the scanned restaurant receipt to this message as well, along with a blurred screenshot of one of the tamer texts between Chloe and Jay. The impact was instantaneous. Within hours, my phone started buzzing with calls from furious mutual friends, then from Chloe herself, screaming and threatening. Jay's wife had clearly acted. The chaos I had sown was beginning to bear bitter fruit. It wasn't about revenge in the heat of the moment. It was about a calculated, surgical strike that would dismantle her life piece by piece, just as she had dismantled mine. The cold satisfaction I felt was a stark contrast to the overwhelming pain that still lingered, but it was a satisfaction nonetheless. This was just the beginning. The fallout was swift and spectacular, even more than I'd anticipated. The HR department launched an internal investigation, immediately putting both Chloe and Jay on administrative leave. The company, keen to avoid a sexual harassment lawsuit or any negative publicity, was ruthless. Jay, being the senior partner, had more to lose and was already scrambling. Chloe's perfect career, the one she'd flaunted and used as an excuse for her late nights, was now hanging by a thread. But it was Jay's wife who truly delivered the coup de grace on the social front. She didn't just confront Jay. She apparently went scorched earth, contacting her own circle of friends, many of whom were also known to Chloe. The details of the affair, fueled by Jay's wife's righteous fury and the partial evidence I'd supplied, spread like wildfire through our intertwined social circles. My phone continued to ring off the hook with calls from former friends of Chloe, some genuinely sympathetic to me, others just reveling in the drama. Chloe was livid. She showed up at my house, not to apologize, but to scream at me, her face contorted with rage. "You ruined my life, Mark. My career. My reputation. How could you do this?" She was practically spitting fire, oblivious to the irony of her words. "You ruined your own life, Chloe," I stated calmly, my voice flat. "I just exposed the truth. The truth you tried so desperately to hide, and then blame me for. You think a yoga retreat receipt just magically appears in your jeans? Or that explicit texts write themselves?" She tried to deny it all, to spin a new narrative, but the evidence was undeniable and the damage was done. The look of utter devastation mixed with frantic desperation on her face was a chilling sight. Her carefully constructed world was collapsing around her, and she was powerless to stop it. The satisfaction was there, a dark, primal surge, but it was still overshadowed by the hollowness in my chest. Revenge, I was learning, was a bitter dish. It didn't bring back what was lost, but it certainly felt like necessary justice. My lawyer was already preparing the divorce papers, armed with a mountain of evidence. The fight was far from over, but the tides had irrevocably turned. The legal process began, and with my lawyer, Sarah, guiding me, it was clear Chloe was in a very bad position. The evidence of her affair, particularly with a superior at her workplace, coupled with her initial denial and attempts to blame me, painted a damning picture. Sarah was confident we could secure a very favorable divorce settlement, essentially leaving Chloe with little more than her personal belongings. Chloe, on the other hand, was spiraling. Her career was in shambles. Jay had been fired, and while she hadn't been outright terminated, she was demoted and ostracized. Her social life, once vibrant and meticulously curated, was in tatters. Friends had unfriended her, blocked her, or simply ghosted her. She was a pariah, living in a cheap rental apartment, a far cry from the beautiful home she had once shared with me. She tried to fight back, of course. Her lawyer made vague threats of defamation, but Sarah quickly shut that down, pointing out the indisputable evidence I possessed and the fact that I had merely presented it to relevant parties. Chloe even tried to play the victim card in court, claiming emotional distress and manipulation, but the judge saw right through it. Her lies were finally catching up to her, and there was nowhere left to hide. The feeling of seeing her broken, utterly defeated, was complex. There was no triumphant roar, no fist-pumping jubilation. Instead, there was a quiet, almost melancholic satisfaction. A part of me, the old Mark, still registered the sadness of seeing someone I once loved so deeply brought to such a low point. But the larger part, the part that had been so brutally betrayed, recognized that this was the inevitable consequence of her actions. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about ensuring justice was served, not just for me, but for the sanctity of marriage and trust itself. The revenge felt complete, but it hadn't magically healed my wounds. Those were still raw, still aching. Hey, if you're still with me, I really appreciate you sticking around for this tough story. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Your support means a lot. With the divorce finalized, a new chapter began, albeit one still heavily scarred by the past. The legal battles were over, and I had effectively secured my financial future and the house, leaving Chloe to face the consequences of her choices. But the legal victory, as satisfying as it was, didn't instantly erase the pain or the emotional turmoil. The process of healing was a slow, arduous journey. I started therapy, something I had resisted for years, even before the betrayal. It proved to be invaluable. Talking through the anger, the sadness, the profound sense of loss, with a professional helped me process the trauma in a healthy way. I learned that while the revenge had felt necessary at the time, true healing wouldn't come from her suffering, but from within myself. I also reconnected with friends and family, allowing myself to lean on their support. They had been a lifeline during the darkest days, and their unconditional love reminded me that my worth wasn't tied to Chloe's perception of me or her betrayal. I started picking up old hobbies I'd neglected and even tried new ones. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to rebuild my life, piece by piece. Seeing Chloe's downfall, her loss of everything she held dear, provided a sense of equilibrium, a feeling that the universe had, in some way, balanced the scales. But it wasn't the joyful, cathartic experience I might have once imagined. It was a cold comfort, a recognition that actions have consequences. The anger had dissipated into a dull ache, replaced by a weary understanding. I wasn't defined by her betrayal, nor by my revenge. I was defined by my resilience, my ability to pick myself up and move forward. The house, once a symbol of our shared dreams, was now just a house. I started redecorating, painting over old memories, literally and figuratively. It was still my home, but now it was truly my home, a sanctuary for a new beginning. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope for the future. The most profound impact of this whole ordeal wasn't just the pain, or even the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the harsh lessons it taught me about myself and human nature. I learned to trust my gut, that knot in my stomach, the whispers of suspicion. They weren't paranoia. They were instincts trying to warn me, and I had ignored them out of a desperate desire to believe in the fantasy I had built. Never again will I dismiss those internal alarms. I also learned a lot about forgiveness, not necessarily for Chloe, but for myself. For forgiving myself for being blind, for being naive, for investing so much in someone who clearly didn't deserve it. It was a journey of self-compassion, understanding that love isn't a weakness, but a vulnerability that, when exploited, can cause immense damage. But it also teaches you resilience. My perspective on relationships has changed drastically. I'm not jaded, not entirely, but I'm certainly more cautious, more aware of red flags. I understand now that trust, once shattered, is almost impossible to mend. And for future relationships, transparency and genuine communication will be paramount. No more secrets, no more ignoring the subtle shifts. Looking back, the revenge felt necessary at the time. It provided a sense of control when my world had spun completely out of control. It was a brutal way to reclaim my dignity and ensure consequences for her cruel actions. Would I do it again? In that moment, with that level of pain and betrayal, probably. But with the clarity of hindsight and healing, I realized that true peace comes from letting go, not from inflicting pain. To anyone out there going through something similar, my advice is this: trust your instincts. Gather your evidence. Get a good lawyer. And don't let their lies define you or your worth. The pain is immense, but you are stronger than you think. Allow yourself to feel it. Seek help. And remember that healing is a process, not an event. And most importantly, choose yourself. Choose your peace. It's hard, it's messy, but it's the only path forward. My life is finally moving on, slowly, but surely, towards something healthier and more genuine. Life since the divorce and the aftermath has been a strange mix of rebuilding and reflection. The house feels different now, less like a mausoleum of broken dreams and more like a fresh canvas. I've thrown out so much of what reminded me of Chloe, not out of anger anymore, but out of a need to create new, untainted spaces. New furniture, new paint colors, even a new layout in some rooms. It's symbolic, I guess, of the internal changes I've been making. I've continued with therapy, and it's been a bedrock. My therapist has helped me navigate the lingering bitterness and the occasional flare-ups of anger when I hear through the grapevine about Chloe's continued struggles. She's still facing the professional consequences, and her social life is non-existent. There's a part of me that still feels that cold satisfaction, but it's not the consuming fire it once was. It's more of a quiet acknowledgement that everyone ultimately faces the repercussions of their choices. Dating is complicated. I've dipped my toe in, mostly casual coffee dates arranged by well-meaning friends. The conversations are awkward, and I find myself extremely guarded. The fear of being hurt again is palpable. I'm honest about my past, not in a way that airs all the dirty laundry, but enough to explain why I'm cautious. Most people are understanding, some even commend my honesty. It's a slow process, learning to trust again, to open up to the possibility of intimacy without the specter of betrayal looming. What I've truly embraced is self-reliance. I've become more independent, more focused on my own well-being and happiness. I'm rediscovering who Mark is, outside of a relationship, outside of the identity of Chloe's husband. It's liberating in a way I never expected. The wounds are still there, deep scars that will likely never fully fade, but they no longer define me. They're just a part of my story, a harsh chapter that ultimately taught me invaluable lessons about strength, resilience, and the brutal truth of human nature. The future is uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, I'm genuinely looking forward to it, whatever it may bring. One unexpected twist in all of this came about 6 months after the divorce was finalized. I received an email from Jay's ex-wife. She had found my Reddit post, incredibly, and recognized enough details to put 2 and 2 together. She reached out, not with anger, but with a surprising sense of camaraderie. She thanked me, genuinely, for being the catalyst that exposed Jay and Chloe. Her own life had also been upended, but she too had found a strange sort of peace in the truth. We met for coffee, cautiously at first. It was an odd encounter, 2 strangers connected by the same painful betrayal. We shared stories, the raw details of our respective partners' lies and manipulations. It was incredibly validating to speak with someone who understood, on a deeply personal level, the insidious nature of what Chloe and Jay had done. There was no romantic spark, nothing like that, just a profound sense of shared experience and mutual understanding. She told me about Jay's continued downfall. He'd struggled to find new employment, his reputation in their industry completely destroyed. Chloe, she'd heard, was working odd jobs and had alienated most of her family. Hearing these updates, not from a place of gloating, but as a confirmation that the consequences were truly far-reaching, brought a strange sense of closure. It wasn't about wishing them ill, but about affirming that justice, in its own slow and brutal way, had been served. Our meeting wasn't about wallowing in the past, though. It was about acknowledging it, processing it, and then moving forward. We talked about our respective paths to healing, the challenges of rebuilding trust, and the unexpected freedoms that came with being unburdened by toxic relationships. It was a testament to the fact that even in the darkest of times, unexpected connections can form, offering support and a sense of shared humanity. It underscored my earlier realization that while revenge provided temporary satisfaction, true healing comes from within and from finding genuine connections, even with those you least expect.